Solomon's Note 2, Belle. Note 4, 17th of January. You revived a great deal of memory in that last note. I had managed to repress most of it for the better, but you brought it back. I'm not angry at you, of course, as it was not your decision. It was only the result of your ignorance. I felt compelled to show you the measure of humanity's wasted potential through the pointlessness of the old structures, as my negativity relentlessly dictates that I do so. This act of sharing is still met with repulsion, even in this new world, and is still approached with the same meaningless psychoanalysis that I mentioned earlier. My neighbor above my room is like you, reader. She has your optimistic folly. I hate that about her. I honestly despise it in her. I can't say that I despise her specifically, but her mind produces the most dissolute filth. Over and over she would tell me, "You're jealous of all the fun other people have," in her annoying pitch that is reminiscent of the shrill voice of a small boy. Her ideology is similarly undeveloped. During the many unfortunate times that we chatted, it became clear that she was incapable of discussing even the most elementary topics of worth. I once tirelessly attempted to broach the subject of her hedonistic tendencies, but she did not want to hear a word of it. Instead, she preferred to talk about what colors she favored or how lovely the sky was. In essence, she has an obscene yet impressive ability to say more words than any other person alive, all the while communicating absolutely nothing. But I should clarify, for her sake, I suppose. Her stupidity is self-inflicted. It is not a biologically determined lack of intelligence, rather, it is a complete aversion to itself. She actually refuses to use her own mind. What kind of arrogance must one wield to waste her own intellect for the sake of happiness? She's essentially evil, isn't she? The things she concerns herself with, too. Granted, most people have a similar concern for laughably ridiculous chaff, but the fact that I see her almost daily due to our proximity makes it all the more unbearable. For instance, a while ago, just after I had the displeasure of meeting her, I forgot her name. I remember it now, naturally, but at the time, the name Bella completely escaped me. And why should it matter anyway? Who the hell cares about the arbitrary title of a person? A name carries no more worth than its use, which is extraordinary, admittedly, but this use is in its distinction between persons, not in a personal distinction. That is to say, there is nothing of the exact description of a person in their name other than they are defined as not these other people. A parent is not so omniscient that they can determine the personality of their children from birth and name them accordingly. Or are we to suppose that people develop based on their name? That would be wholly pathetic, wouldn't it? Regardless, I knew she would never forgive me for failing to remember what distinguishes her from the grand total of no one else that I know. Worse yet, she would forgive me in a masturbatory and condescending effort to feel moral. I wished to avoid both of these scenarios, so I simply steered clear of asking for clarification while assuming that it would come up eventually and in passing. Months she tortured me. I sat in my room, pulling my hair, trying to remember, days passing by with the potential for disaster growing. If she simply wasn't so egregiously stupid, then I wouldn't have been forced to endure this pointless charade in the hopes that I would spare her emotions from turmoil. I agonized over the potential agony I would cause her, regardless of how stupid it was that she would feel anything at all. It was not because I'm a good person. I would never claim to be in any way decent. That would be ridiculous. No. I agonized because I did not wish to deal with the wounds of another person, and I especially did not wish to cause said wounds, making me even more obligated to heal them. Are you now suggesting that I am assuming too much of this person? Well, you would be incorrect, because when the truth was finally revealed in another superfluous conversation, she reacted poorly. I was helping her with her windows, seeing as she is by no means handy, and she was going on and on about some poor fellow she knew. His name was Abraham or something. I don't know. From what I recall, they were romantically interested, and they may still be. Anyway, she was blabbering about some insignificant slight they had probably unknowingly inflicted on her, and she was regaling me with the contrasted drama of their first contact. Scavenging in a particularly large carcass of a supermarket, they caught eyes and were swept away by each other. It's a sort of imaginary garbage that makes my mind vomit into itself and suffocate. The conversation started harmlessly, of course, and it was similar, possibly identical for all I know or remember, to all our previous discussions of the topic. That is, one-sided avalanches of a great many words and emotions. This time, apparently, the significant other victim had made an assault on Bella's honor, asked a perfectly legitimate question, by inquiring about the existence of a sexual history, remembering what I mentioned about libraries. He wanted to know if she had a great deal of perverse experience, which is actually a rather dangerous possibility given the current circumstances and the reality of sexual disease in the area, as he had the nerve, forethought, to think that it made any sort of difference, a vast canyon between two totally separate entities in their relationship, hostage situation. I do not think that he was such a pig, normal human being, as to think she would not be worthy, safe, for him, but she expected as much. I feel as though he loved her far too much for that to be the case. On that note, you should search your companion for something called Stockholm Syndrome. At some point she arrived at a specific conversation she had with her lover. "He's just so terrible to me sometimes," she said, "and I don't know why he acts that way." I started, "Perhaps you were reading a bit too much into what he actually meant by the question." It was a risky move, yes, but it had the potential to bring the conversation to a quick and decisive close. "I understand why he wants to know, it's just how he said it," she complained. "How would you have asked?" I would have started with, "I would never want to hurt you, but..." I trailed off. I knew her name started with B, but what was the rest? There was no going back. She was onto my treachery. She saw my games. She was exposed to my unforgivable error. "Don't you remember my name?" At this, my interior caverns collapsed. With a single question, the pain of an evil realization shot through me like a poisoned arrow, devouring my insides and paralyzing my thoughts. This was, indeed, the moment I dreaded. This was the single event that encapsulates my relationship with all of humanity. I hurt her. I hurt her because I was incapable of remembering something that she stupidly places value in. "I'm sorry," I said. "I think I actually did forget your name. Massacre. The damage I was causing to this unfortunate woman was untold in its magnitude." "You could have just asked me earlier," she shot back. "I'm actually sort of offended that you went this long without saying anything." But the worst of it was still to come. I made yet another fatal error. I used reason. "Well, to be honest, I don't think names are particularly important. All they do is describe you as not these other humans, so I can't really say that it was terribly crucial to our relationship. It has nothing to do with you as a person." What a fool I was. Had I forgotten that people at large refuse to think before they feel? What's worse, this person feels and never thinks at all, making her frightfully volatile. "I don't think I know what you mean," she said. "Is this supposed to make me feel better?" Then the final blow. "I'm just saying that I think your name is a bit relevant. Tears." She wept. She wept in front of me, angry and dejected. She cried, "Do you not care at all?" Then began the phase of crisis management. Immediately I recognized a flaw in my tactics. Reason would not do well here, so I swapped it out for emotional appeal. I began to say things like, "No, I definitely care about you." I tried to clarify my intention by stating that I would never want to hurt a friend. I made sure to use that word too, that is, friend, even though it holds essentially no meaning. "Do you recall what I said about her intelligence being wasted? Remember that she's not biologically stupid, rather, she makes herself stupid. What this means is that she can turn her intelligence back on at a whim. It is really quite sad that she decided to do so here. She caught on to my strategy and she countered it with its revelation. Don't do that. Don't treat me like a child, she said angrily. I panicked again and I decided to switch back to reason. I clarified the argumentative nature of my original statement saying, It's not you, it's your name. Just because I don't remember your name doesn't mean I don't remember you, because you aren't the sum of your name. You're rationalizing, she protested. You might be tempted to agree with her. Would you be suggesting that I should not be rational? If you're going to argue with me on the basis of reason, then you best be prepared to understand it and receive it. No, I said, I'm just saying that it doesn't really matter if I know your name. So you're saying I don't matter? Back to emotions, I suppose. Don't think that I'm unaware of my own deficiency. I'm emotionally dim-witted, it's true, but that does not make me any less right. Well, I'm only partially right in this instance. I did apologize. I said, I am sorry that I forgot your name, and of course you matter. There was no deceit in that apology either, and on some level she was correct in that I should have simply asked earlier, so I told her that she was right. However, I am not some sort of idiot who sees all arguments to exist on a binary of right and wrong. There are elements, layers, and textures. I was correct that she should never have cared in the first place. I do not know if she was aware that I held this conviction, but she certainly did not trust the apology. You're treating me like a child again, she said. How should I have responded to this? Should I argue that with her? Repeating the apology seemed like a rather pointless thing to do, and it would probably have enraged her further. Thus, I left. I left her alone like the coward I am. I said, I'm sorry, I don't know what else to say, and I walked out of her room. I could hear her then gentle sobs as I passed her doorframe, but what else was there to do? It was clear that my presence was simply infuriating her, and anything I tried to say was met with complete disdain. I am one of the few people she knows. No doubt, the enormity of time she had spent with me, albeit wasted, was important to her. As night fell and I burrowed into the blankets of my entirely petrified mattress, I had a horrific dream. This was after I experienced considerable difficulty slipping out of this world. Over and over, my subconscious did battle with my conscious mind, keeping me awake to sink deeper into the abyss of internal hatred. Well, in all honesty, it was not much of a battle. It was more of a slaughter, as my subconscious chided my free self for being so evil to poor Belle. When I finally managed to silence consciousness and slip into the world of mirrors, I expected to find some comfort there, though I do not understand why. Surely I should have anticipated the hellscape from reality, seeing as it had been bombarding the real from afar for hours. I stood at the door of her house. It was like we were back in the old days when people owned entire structures and dwelt within. I knocked on her front door to signal my presence, and I heard her rushing down the stairs to see me, a friend, waiting for her company. She opened the door with a great smile on her face and hugged me. I wondered why she smiled. Even before, in the old world, I was a terribly negative soul. She had to have known that I would cough up the most depressing yet true observations. She had to have known that I could not break into some imaginary world of optimism. Still, she smiled. Why? Why did she do this to herself? I asked her about her day, and she said something about some conflict she had with someone she knew. But even in the face of this, she smiled. She kept smiling. We meandered to the kitchen where I sat at her tiny dinner table as she put together some drink of hers. She asked me how I had been, a silly question of course, and I told her that I was largely the same. I said something about how I was doing well. I said it in that tone that makes it obvious that the answer is simply a nicety of conversational expectation, and it was clear that she caught on to this. She asked me how I was really doing, so I gave her the honesty she desired, though I had my doubts that she knew what she was to receive entirely. I told her that I felt useless, like a husk of some otherwise serviceable machine. I told her that the more I experienced it, the world seemed to fade into a pointless yet complex mixture of interconnected nothingness. Still, she smiled. After I vomited my drivel, she walked over to me and answers similar to this before. No doubt my subconscious simply interpreted the collection of all the answers I had previously heard into a single statement. It is an accurate representation, I feel. Anyway, she finished concocting her mysterious drink and brought it to the table. She brought 2 cups of the stuff, so I do not know why she bothered to ask me if I wanted any, seeing as she seemed to have already assumed I would. Accepting it, I asked her what it was, and in an attempt to sound adorable, she said, "I call it Hot Happy Helper." I laughed immediately in a disgustingly condescending way because I could not help but feel as though the name was rather ridiculous for what tasted like black tea with some honey in it. Not fazed, she smiled. After I apologized, we continued to talk about what had been troubling me. She, like everyone else in the world, seemed to think that there was some single event that shaped me into this warped individual whose words you are now reading. I tried to explain to her that it was a deduction from thought, but she simply would not accept the idea. I suspected that she saw me to be feeling before thinking, so I explained our differing thought processes. Eventually, in the middle of what was the most important discussion we had ever had, she stopped me to ask if I was enjoying her Hot Happy Helper. Frankly, I had never liked tea, and what does it matter? People have a diversity of literal tastes among general tastes, and they do not particularly speak to the worth of a person. They simply exist. I told her that I was not fond of the taste of her prized drink. She did not smile any longer. Everything became uncomfortably silent. The already small amount of light streaming in from the windows vanished, leaving only the faint and pale glow of her candles. Both of her hands had been hidden under the table for the duration of the conversation, so when she lifted her right arm to reveal that she was holding a knife, I panicked and grabbed her wrist. She is not a strong person by any means, so it was not difficult to wrestle the knife from her grasp. She then let loose an unnaturally deathly scream, launching herself towards me in an attempt to bite me and claw at my neck. My involuntary reaction was to push her away, and in doing so I stabbed her in her abdomen with the knife I now wielded. I rushed to her, all of my brain tearing itself apart, and I tried to put pressure on the wound. I began to cry as I repeated the words, "I'm sorry," until they were the only words I knew. It is interesting how time changes shape depending on the context, as what felt like a brief instant turned into the length of an age, even though I'm sure the respective difference in actual time was non-existent. I tried to prevent the blood flow, but it only increased as I sat beside her. The worst of it was that she was still angry at me, cursing me between her moaning. She was in such pain. Now I sat with a great ethical dilemma. In the world of this dream, it was clear that I would not be able to save her. She was destined to die at my hands, but the question then was that of when. Her pain was escalating to the point where she was not even creating words. In that instant, I made the decision. I decided to end it. I held the knife to her throat and cut open her skin, letting yet more blood drain from her onto the floor in my hands. The motion was surprisingly easy, I should note. Here I thought it was over. I thought I had spared her from more pain, but I was wrong. She kept bleeding until her entire kitchen was covered in blood, yet she was alive. The blood continued to flow for minutes while I sat in horror, watching her reach out towards me in an effort to enact revenge. She remained weak, however. I walked back to her. At this point, I had been pacing beside my chair and attempted to stab her again, this time in a different place. I stabbed her stomach, letting out even more blood. Then I stabbed her head, her skull. With each stab, she screamed all the more. I was now panicking to the point of absolute insanity. I stabbed her over and over, all over her body, trying desperately to end her life. She would not die, and at this point the wounds were firing blood off in every direction. I stabbed and I stabbed, crying with blood all over me. She wailed in her agony as I lost my mind. Eventually I I started to sever her fingers and then hack at her limbs, cutting them off just to leave them on the floor. I stabbed at her eyes and I cut out her tongue. I tried to remove any piece of her that I could, like some sort of maniacal butcher with his cow.